right. This is just my particular take on it. It's not like it's reality. It's just what I've distinguished in terms of when I talk about compassion, what do I mean by it? Mm-hmm. So passion means to suffer, and calm means to suffer with. So there's the passion of Christ, the suffering of Christ. So in a certain basic sense, when somebody else suffers, we suffer. I mean, when you see a dog being beaten in the street, how do you feel? You suffer. When you see a child being mistreated. So compassion is to suffer with. And that's an inborn capacity of human beings. It's never not there, although often enough it's completely blocked. So that's what I call ordinary human compassion. When I say ordinary, that's not a pejorative. I just mean that it's there. That's the first level. And basically it comes down to somebody suffering. I wish they weren't. Because it hurts me to see somebody suffer. The second level is what I call the compassion of curiosity. Now, if somebody's suffering and you want to help them, it's not enough to feel bad for them. You also have to do some inquiry. Well, why are they suffering? What's going on? There's a lot of people out there, one of my subjects, as you mentioned, is addiction. And a lot of people feel bad for people who are addicted, but they don't actually ask why. They make assumptions that this person is just making a bad choice or they got this disease, but they don't really inquire. So the compassion of curiosity says, well, what about this person's life? What happened here? What's going on? If they're violent, if they're angry, if they're sad, if they're ill, why? So that's the compassion of curiosity. The third level is what I call the compassion of recognition, which is, and this was simply my experience in the practice of medicine, but also in life, is that there's nothing about anybody else that isn't in me as well. So when I was working with these really benighted street dwellers in Vancouver with HIV and their hepatitis and their drug addictions, well, the differences between them and me were obvious in terms of class and clout and education and all that. But if I was really honest with myself, that hungry ghost, that empty self that just wants to be fed from the outside all the time, which is what the addiction is, that characterized me as well in significant ways. And I played it out through my work and through my shopping habits and so on. So that's the compassion of recognition, when you realize that you're not different from these others. When I talk about this, when people come to that part of my book about my compact disc addiction, people sometimes, well, this dude turned me off. How can he compare himself to, I think they have a problem. The dinner is obvious. Sorry, the differences are obvious. It's the similarities that are interesting. I would lie just like they would. I would manipulate just like they would. I would pursue the habit despite the harm that it caused to myself and others, just like they would. That's much more interesting than the differences. So that's the compassion of recognition. And interestingly enough, when I tell them about my patterns, I'm talking about my downtown East Side patients with their HIV and their heroin habits, they never said, that's ridiculous. They said, oh, dog, you're just like the rest of us, aren't you? And that's the whole point. We're all just like the rest of us. We're all just like the rest of us. That's the compassion of recognition. By the way, that's where the judgments come in, because that's what's really interesting. Because when you explore the judgments, you'll find out that's exactly how much you're like that person that you're judging. So that once you have the compassion of recognition, you're no longer up here and they're down here and you're looking down on them. It's two people engaging equally. The fourth level is what I call the compassion of truth. Now, you may think on the surface of it that if it's compassionate to protect people from pain. Not necessarily. It's compassionate to protect people from unavoidable pain. Sorry, from avoidable pain. If you can protect somebody from avoidable pain, it's compassionate to do that. That's ordinary human compassion. But sometimes the truth actually really hurts. That's why we protect against it. That's why we're afraid to grieve, because we're so afraid to accept the loss. So when you work with people mindfully or therapeutically or whatever way, you're not being compassionate if you stay away from asking questions that might bring up pain for them. You're not asking the question ever to bring up pain. That's manipulative. But you're also not avoiding a question, even if it might bring up pain. So that's what I call the compassion of truth, because people just want to know the truth. Like, what was your experience when you were grieving? I mean, just the truth of it is what really was so healing for you. Oh yeah, there it is. Would it have been compassionate on somebody's part to say, don't do the ayahuasca because you don't want to feel all that grief? You know? So that's what I call the compassion of truth. And then there's what I call, maybe for lack of a better phrase, the compassion of possibility, which is when you see a suffering being, which is to say, when you see another human being, do you see only their suffering and their dysfunction, which is a response to the suffering, and their defenses and their reactions? Or do you see the perfection that they are underneath all that, the true self? That's important, because none of us can see ourselves without a mirror. Outside of a spiritual experience, we can't see ourselves without a mirror. Well, if somebody presents with dysfunction and, say, addiction or reactions or negativity of any kind, and all I do is I mirror their own view of themselves, I'm not helping them. But what if I mirrored back what I do see, which is their possibility, which is not in the future, it's in the present. Now they get to see themselves differently. So that's what I call the compassion of possibility. And those are the 5 levels. Now, needless to say, if you're going to be a mirror, guess what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to do a lot of self-cleaning. Otherwise, you'll be a very murky, smudgy mirror. And that's, of course, where the compassion for the self comes in as well.
We provide you with the certification and the credentials you need to teach mindfulness in professional settings. I invite you to check out our webpage at teach.mindfulnessexercises.com to learn more about the program, and I look forward to seeing you on the inside.